The Iron Throne was still wet with his uncle's blood when the boy arrived. He was 14 years old. The kingdom was broken. The faith was at war with the crown. The great lords had scattered, and the most powerful seat in the world was stained with the death of the man who had sat it last. Most boys that age are learning to hold a sword. This one had to hold a kingdom together. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Blood of the Dragon, Episode 3, Jaehaerys the Conciliator. When peace defeated fire, Jaehaerys Targaryen flew to King's Landing on Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, the third largest dragon in the world. He came ahead of the armies, ahead of the lords who had declared for him. He came alone, on a beast that could melt castle walls. And he chose not to burn a single thing. He was crowned not with the conqueror's circlet, not with Maegor's, but with his father's crown. Aenys, the gentle king, the one who had been destroyed by the very throne Jaehaerys now claimed. The choice was a message. This reign would not begin in conquest, but in memory. His first act was mercy. Every lord and knight who had served Maegor was offered a pardon. Return to King's Landing, swear fealty, and your lands and titles are restored. The terms were measured. A son or daughter as hostage, or a sum of gold. And as word spread across the realm that the boy king was willing to forgive, the swords that had hidden behind castle walls came out. Not to fight, to kneel. Where Maegor had ruled through terror, Jaehaerys began with trust. But he was still a boy, and not everyone trusted a boy. Lord Rogar Baratheon, the first great lord to declare for Jaehaerys, was named Hand of the King and Protector of the Realm. Rogar was strong, loyal, decisive, everything a regent should have been. And then he overreached. He married Jaehaerys' mother without asking the king's permission. He grew comfortable in power. And when word reached him that Jaehaerys had secretly wed his own sister Alysanne, the two of them flying together on Vermithor and Silverwing to Dragonstone in the dead of night, married by a single Septon on the island where they were born. Rogar tried to have the marriage undone. He even suggested setting Jaehaerys aside entirely. In another reign, it might have been answered as treason. But Jaehaerys did not answer with fire. When Rogar came to the capital expecting the war, expecting chains, the boy king pardoned him. 2 conditions: never speak against the crown again, and be a good husband to my mother. Then he walked Rogar to where Vermithor was feeding. A bronze dragon the size of a great hall, tearing into a carcass with teeth longer than swords. The heat from his breath warping the air between them. Jaehaerys said nothing. He simply let the Lord watch. And in that silence, Rogar understood. Every man, woman, and child in the Stormlands was already the king's hostage. Not because Jaehaerys would burn them, because he could. Mercy backed by power, restraint backed by fire. That was the way of Jaehaerys. But the deepest wound in the realm was not political, it was spiritual. For 11 years the faith Militant had raged against the Targaryen dynasty. Maegor had answered with dragonfire, burning septs, slaughtering holy men, offering a gold dragon for every severed head. And still they fought, because belief cannot be burned out of the world. For every zealot who fell, 3 more rose from the ashes. Jaehaerys understood what his uncle never did. He did not raise his sword. He sat down and talked. The agreement was simple and brilliant. The crown would forever defend and protect the faith. The faith would disband its military orders, the warriors' sons, the poor fellows, and accept the king's justice. And regarding the Targaryen practice of marrying brother to sister, The faith did not have to approve. They only had to acknowledge. It was not surrender. It was a truce dressed as understanding, and it held. Then came the masterstroke. The Doctrine of Exceptionalism. Written by Jaehaerys alongside a humble Septon named Barth and the old Septon who had married him in secret. The argument was elegant. The faith was born in Andalos. Its laws were written for Andal men. But the Targaryens were not Andals. They came from Valyria. They rode dragons. They were the only family in the world who still did. They were by nature exceptional. And therefore, laws made for other men could not bind them so simply. Jaehaerys sent 7 preachers, 3 men, 4 women, barefoot across the realm, village to village, town to town, speaking of the king's wisdom and the queen's kindness. Not soldiers, not knights with swords, pilgrims. And where Maegor's fire had only fed rebellion, Jaehaerys' words extinguished it. The faith Militant did not rise again for more than 2 centuries. The boy had succeeded where the monster had failed. And then he found his hand. Not among the great lords, not among the celebrated knights or highborn councillors, in a library. Septon Barth was the son of a blacksmith. He had come to King's Landing to care for the books in the Red Keep. He was a lowborn, plain-spoken, and brilliant in ways that made highborn lords uncomfortable. Jaehaerys saw what they could not. He named Barth Hand of the king. The lords were outraged. A commoner, a Septon who smelled of ink and dust, sitting in judgment over princes. Barth answered them with 40 years. 40 years of peace and plenty. He helped unify the laws of 7 kingdoms into a single code. 1 realm, 1 law. He built drains and sewers and fountains for King's Landing. He travelled to Braavos and convinced the Iron Bank to forgive the crown's debts entirely. And he wrote a book on the nature of dragons, the finest work of its kind, that a pious king named Baelor would burn to ashes 60 years later, a blacksmith's son, the greatest hand who ever served. And beside the king always rode his queen, Alysanne. Good Queen Alysanne they called her, and the name was earned in the roads and villages of the realm, not in the throne room. She held women's courts wherever the royal progress travelled, highborn and lowborn alike. Any woman could come before the queen and speak freely of her fears, her griefs, her hopes. No lord was permitted to attend. No man could silence what was said. When she flew Silverwing to the wall, tens of thousands of northerners came to see a dragon for the first time. She was so moved by the sacrifice of the Night's Watch that she sold her own jewels, her own crown, to build them a castle. They renamed a gate in her honor, Queen's Gate. And when she tried to fly beyond the wall, Silverwing refused. 3 times she urged her dragon north. 3 times the silver beast turned away. A dragon who had never once disobeyed her rider would not cross. Something beyond that wall frightened even a dragon, but it was in a brothel near the wall that Alysanne changed the law forever. A woman told her a story. She had been a blacksmith's daughter, wed at 14. On her wedding night, the local lord came with his men to claim his ancient right, the lord's right of the first night. When he was finished, she was returned to her husband. The husband, unable to raise his hand against a lord, raised it against his wife instead. When he discovered she was carrying the lord's child, he beat her until she lost it. She told Alysanne that if the world was going to call her a whore, she might as well live as one. And so she had. Alysanne carried that story back to the small council. Jaehaerys hesitated. It was a lord's ancient privilege, and kings did not take such things lightly. But Septon Barth rose and spoke of how the custom defiled the very sanctity the faith was meant to protect. And the king was convinced. The Lord's right of the first night was abolished across the 7 kingdoms. A queen who listened, a hand who understood, a king who could be moved. That was the heart of the Golden Age. Together, they built the King's Road, 2,000 miles of stone, and packed earth stretching from Storm's End to the Wall. They gave the realm one law, one road, one justice. The population grew. Trade flowed through arteries that had never existed before. For the first time since the conquest, the 7 kingdoms truly felt like one realm. And the king who made it possible wore a crown of his own design. Not iron, not Valyrian steel. A simple gold band set with 7 gemstones of different colors. One for each kingdom. One for each piece of a broken realm he had put back together. 55 years he sat the Iron Throne. The longest reign. The wisest king. A partnership forged in secret on a beach in Dragonstone that reshaped the world. But even the Golden Age cast shadows. A firstborn son who lived only 3 days. A daughter taken by plague at 6. She woke her mother in the dark, shivering, and was gone before the next sunset. Infants who never saw their first year. And somewhere beneath the warmth of the longest peace the realm had ever known, the first cold winds began to blow, because even the best king who ever lived could not protect his family from grief. And grief, in the end, would break them all. So tell me this, was Jaehaerys truly the greatest king? Or was it Alysanne and Barth who made him great? Write it in the comments. And if you want to hear what happened when the Golden Age ended, when the children began to die one by one, when the queen turned cold, and when the wisest king alive made the one mistake that would wound his dynasty forever, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter. Because next time, we follow the old king into grief, 13 children, 10 graves, and a council that planted the seed for the bloodiest war the realm had ever seen.